Welcome to the Physical Product Movement, a podcast by Fiddle. We share stories of the world's most ambitious and exciting physical product brands to help you capitalize on the monumental change in how, why, and where consumers buy. I'm your host, Ken Ojuka. In this episode, I speak with Andrew Runnette, founder of Natural Food Solutions, an operations and strategy consulting company to CPG brands and food service businesses. Andrew started his career as an Italian-trained chef, then worked his way up the ranks at Whole Foods for 14 years. Leaning into his experience in CPG as a consultant, he now helps brands avoid the common operations mistakes he sees them making. He talks about powerful trends he sees in the marketplace and how brands are capitalizing on them. Andrew also shares some valuable tips on how to reduce cost when launching a new CPG product or food service business. Lots of great stuff in this episode. Enjoy. All right, Andrew. Hey, thanks for jumping on. Welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
Yeah. Hey, so from the top, we just like to kick it off with a quote that's impactful to you or something that you like to live by. Do you have one in mind?
Yeah, it's from my favorite chef, Anthony Bourdain. It's a simple one. It's your body is not a temple. It's an amusement park. Enjoy the ride. I think life is all about just enjoying the ride. So
perfect. Yeah, I love that. So for people who don't know you or your company, do you mind just telling us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I trained under an Italian chef in Pittsburgh, where I'm from, back in end of high school into college. Found Whole Foods Market in 2003. Worked my way up the corporate ladder, if you will, and moved out to the West Coast in 2004. I was with Whole Foods for almost 14 years and then left in 2016 to go to a few failed startups and then started my consulting company at the same time. And I've been consulting in the food space for a little over about 5 years now. So I help CPG brands get into food service and vice versa. So help food service brands as well kind of pivot into CPG, but I'm more on the operations side, and I'm really good at financials for startups in the CPG space.
Awesome. And you're in LA now, right?
Yep, in LA, a little south in Hermosa Beach. Yeah.
Okay, very nice. Well, I'm just curious, Italian trained chef. Tell us a little bit more about that experience.
Sure. I worked in a little tiny market on Reynolds Street in Pittsburgh, and it was purchased while I was working there. In 1998, I believe, by an Italian chef. And he, we kind of found a liking to each other, and he just started training me. And I trained under him for about 3 years, and then I became sous chef in one of his restaurants for about a year and a half. And then I realized I didn't love the nightlife of the restaurant world. So that's when I decided to make the move to Whole Foods Market. But it was a cool kind of out of the blue experience, and didn't really know what I was going to do with my career at that point in high school, but he really showed me a lot and made me fall in love with food.
Cool. And in your bio, you actually talk about, being interested in food from a pretty early age, from about, 12 years old. How did that passion start? And I guess, how did it evolve over the years?
I don't know exactly how it started. I've been asked that before. I mean, I started washing dishes at that market, and I was 12 years old. So I think just being around food and just being interested I just remember always scooping my finger through, whatever mixing bowl it was and tasting the flavors. And I was like, oh man, this is cool. I'm just interested in it. And then I just asked to start prepping vegetables and, cutting potatoes and onions and celery and carrots and whatnot, for whatever the market was making for that week. And I think that's kind of where it started and where it came from, just kind of being around food. So my mom wasn't like the biggest chef or anything like that, or cook, but yeah, I think that's where it started.
Sure. And tell us a little bit about the transition over to Whole Foods. What took you there, and then you stayed there obviously 14 years. What was your role there?
Oh, I had many. The transition was nice because I was getting paid more, and only working 40 hours a week instead of like 60 or 70. So that was really nice. But I saw, I saw, and I'm 21, 22 years old, like having a nice work-life balance was cool. College wasn't my thing. So, it was interesting. And then I realized I could move up in the company. I knew how to move out of Pittsburgh, which I wanted to do anyway. But it was a good kind of stepping stone to get out of Pittsburgh and, have a job. And my cousin actually had moved, who's basically my brother, had moved to California about a year before me. I went out and visited him, landed a interview while I was visiting him, and then got a position and moved. Probably within like a month or two, I was part of the opening team of the Valencia store, which is like an hour north of Los Angeles. And I thought I was close to the beach, but that's back in like MapQuest days. So you couldn't really see where you were moving. But held a lot of roles. I opened about 35 or more stores with Whole Foods. And that's kind of how I worked my way up. I started opening stores just as a cook, and then, just as like a trainer on the sandwich station. And then folks, saw my work ethic and, knowledge and such. And then I moved all the way up to what they call it as like an associate director position of food service, which associate prepared foods coordinator is the title. And that's, kind of one of the supporting roles for overseeing all of the prepared foods department. And that was about 8 years long. I did that. Yeah.
Nice. And then, you moved on to a couple startups. Just want to get an idea of maybe a couple lessons that you learned from these startups. You mentioned that a couple of them failed,
Yeah.
Sometimes those are the best learning experiences. What did you learn? What did you observe?
They 100% are. It is what I've learned and what I've just learned just throughout my career and working with different startups and just different companies, especially consulting the last few years, is just team. The team is the most important thing. It really is building a solid team, and finding the right people. Like, don't just hire to hire. Don't just hire based on people's resume either. It just, one of the startups that failed was based out of Miami, and it was basically just a clash of personalities. This is what really ended up happening. And the funding person pulled the plug just because people weren't getting along, and not seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. So that's probably the biggest lesson I've learned, is just building a really solid team and foundation. The product is important, of course, but the team is what makes that product happen.
Yeah, understood. And I'm sure most people don't set out to, build a terrible team, or a bad team. What are some things to look out for? I mean, I think you mentioned, just getting along, being able to work effectively together. Are there any other things that you see in good teams or high functioning teams?
It's kind of just personality, and just hiring for personality that fits the team's personality. So I think it's taking a step back if you're the founders and looking at, what will complement the founders, right? And what will complement everybody else on the team. I mean, skill set, of course, is important. But it's I think that's just finding that meshing, and it's not always going to be easy. I mean, it's going to take some work and some team building. But I think that's the key. I really do.
Awesome.
I think that's what John Mackey had always talked about, the CEO of Whole Foods. It's like, it's just the teamwork and hiring the right people, to fit into a situation,
Yeah. Yeah. So let's jump to what you're doing now with Natural Food Solutions. Can you tell us a little bit about your services, what you provide, and maybe a couple examples of what you could do for a company?
Sure. Yeah. So I've had the company for about 4 years. It's been a roller coaster ride of just kind of finding my niche in the industry. But I've found it in the sense of I just love helping startups and I love guiding them. So that's really what I do. And it's, I'm a bit of a jack of all trades, but I really focus on operations and financials, and those two, how they go hand in hand. And I'm really good at both of them. I've built out kind of a CPG startup financial template that can be altered or just kind of a plug and play type of template. And then, I'm just good at operations and just really figuring out what the best path is operationally, whether it's finding a co-packer or, introducing somebody to the right packaging company or, just really putting the pieces together that is really tough in the first, year or two of a CPG brand.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the financials. What are some of the mistakes that you see startup companies making as they enter a CPG?
I think the biggest mistake people make is just giving away margin dollars too early. And, just going with something because they see the big shiny sign on the front door type of thing, so they get asked to go into Whole Foods or something like that, or, Sprouts or, some of these larger natural retailers. They give away too many margin dollars and don't know exactly what that negotiation looks like, because it is a negotiation. It's not like, here's my cost of my cost of good and here's what I'm going to give to you. You really got to dial that in. And I think the second part is not knowing how to negotiate when you get into the co-packer side of things and the co-manufacturers, and giving away, not giving away dollars, but more or less, how do I put it? It just not negotiating with the co-manufacturer, and looking at kind of what the cost of goods looks like, and just kind of, okay, this is what you're giving me, then, that's what I'm going with. But, there's a negotiation there too.
Sure. And would you say that's true for even, new brands that are pretty small, maybe don't feel like they have a lot of leverage in that negotiation?
Yeah.
I talk to a lot of brands who are just happy that somebody will make their product. They're so relieved to find that co-packer that they, pretty much settle, as you're explaining. What points of leverage or what things do you think that they should make sure to negotiate?
I mean, it really varies from brand to brand and like what you're making, because a lot of it's, seasonality sometimes, like I've got a client now where we're going to pitch Whole Foods probably next week, I'm hoping. But, the last few months has been working with a co-manufacturer and really finding the right one. I think that's key that people miss is finding the right co-manufacturer, not just going with like the one that you find first, and just having a little bit of patience. And I understand sometimes this, you just have to move. But I think that's pretty key in finding the right person to work with. I mean, it goes back to what I was saying about hiring, just finding that right fit.
Sure, sure. And I think that makes sense. What you remind me of is a quote that I heard from a guy named Dan Kennedy. He's like a marketing guy. And he talks about how the worst number in business is one. Anytime you just have one of something, you're vulnerable. And I definitely see that with copacker. Like you're saying, somebody finds a copacker and they feel just, okay, this is my guy and I have to make it work. Whereas, if you look at all your options and look around and really try to find multiple co-packers, then whether you're getting a good deal or, you've got a plan B in case, plan A falls through.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like building a house,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're getting your paint done on the outside of your house, right? You want to get a couple quotes, you don't want to just go with the first painter, and look at the reviews and talk to people, I mean, it's just, but I see it happen more often than not, unfortunately, where, people are just in a bind and brands are just in a bind and they kind of have to jump because they're on a deadline too,
Sure. Yeah. So what are your thoughts about, some of these early brands, trying to see if they can make this product themselves, even just manufacturing or doing the initial batches in-house if they can. What are your thoughts around that strategy?
I think that's the best way to start. It's interesting with the change in like the direct to consumer area of things, and obviously needing longer shelf life on certain things. But
Mm-hmm.
If you're making something, I think that's the best place to start. Especially now with the shared kitchens and kind of the ghost kitchens that are out there that are pretty affordable. And even like shared commercial kitchens that like food trucks use. Those brands can get into there and use those kitchens and mess around with things and really figure out your flavor profiles for exactly what you're trying to do. So I think it's a good place to start for sure. Is and you just have a bit more control as well.
Yeah, understood. I mean, you could start with smaller batches. Sure, your margins may not be dialed in, but in the very beginning, you're not as concerned about that. You just need to make sure you get the product right. And so being able to iterate quickly is a huge advantage. And you mentioned flavor profiles, but even just iterating on stuff like packaging, and flavors, of course, but even just product. Like what do I name this product? How do I test that this name is resonating? Those types of things. You want that control to be able to iterate quickly.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So you mentioned ghost kitchens. I mean, for people who aren't familiar with that term, I know what you're talking about, but maybe you could explain a little bit about that trend in the industry and how a new CPG brand would be able to get into one of those or find one.
Sure. There's a place here. I'm going to plug them. But in LA, I think they've opened up like 10 now. And I think they have about 15 or 20 kitchens of different sizes in each. I think it's called Cloud Kitchens. But anyway, the point being is you can rent them for pretty cheap. And you can even test things on, a DoorDash service or, they're completely connected both digitally, but also like just knowing people on that side of things. So you can rent their kitchen just to test things, but you can also rent their kitchens to test even like a delivery side of things. So, I don't think they have, I think some of them have like just minimum, maybe a month or two, but I think that's probably a perfect time to test. But yeah, that industry is just going crazy. It's nuts. I mean, restaurants are using it. I see a lot of food trucks pivoting out of it, out of the food truck thing just into that, especially with all the things that went down the last year and a half. But
right with COVID.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, it seems like COVID was a huge accelerant for that industry. Just being able to get food delivered to your home. And so to your point, I think a few years ago, the big strategy if you were starting a restaurant was let's launch a food truck. That's a cheap way to do this or cheaper way to do it. We can test out, our concept. But I think cloud kitchens are proving to be an even better way to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
mean,
so,
celebrities are using it, which is crazy. And,
mhm.
yeah, it's really cool. It's a really cool concept. But
And so,
I see a lot of opportunity for brands in the CPG space doing that for sure.
sure. Do you mind explaining that just a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, just like I was saying, I mean, I think it's just a great place to test. But it may just be a way to, pivot, as well and add another revenue stream, right? Like say I don't have a good example, but maybe even if you're making a good sauce, right? Any type of sauce, say like an Indian flavored sauce that you're already in some grocery stores, but why not use that sauce and deliver it, to people's houses via cloud kitchen, you know? Yeah, I just think it's a really just cool vessel for lots of different opportunities. And I don't think a lot of people have done it that way yet or looked at it that way, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I mean that concept, it still kind of blows my mind, right? That you
yeah,
can have a restaurant that's completely virtual, right?
yeah,
You don't have you don't actually have a storefront or, a dine-in part of the restaurant. It just exists on, something like Uber Eats or DoorDash.
yeah,
You name it. Let's go with that Indian food restaurant. You name it, whatever you want, and you test out this concept. And if it hits, you expand on it. If it doesn't, you can quickly pivot into Korean food or, like
yep,
some other niche of food.
yeah.
I think it's fascinating.
Me too. I've looked into it in depth even for myself, just to as I've always been interested in opening something like that, but the capital behind it is huge, but this makes it a lot more accessible, so
And so the advantage to a CPG company, that's brand new out of the gate, let's say that you've got a concept for like a protein bar. So you could rent one of these spaces, and instead of, delivering food via DoorDash or something like that, you would actually just use their commercial kitchens to come up with your first prototypes, even your first, initial runs of this protein bar.
exactly. Yep,
And
exactly.
then,
And
then you,
I think they
yeah,
have cooler space and storage and all that stuff, um, yeah, I'm pretty sure they have the whole nine to be able to do all the things you need to do to become a brand. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and just to completely land the plane, this helps you to not have to invest in real estate, not have to invest in expensive equipment, freezers, fridges, all the things that you would need in order to actually produce this stuff in house.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, if you're a protein bar and you're, say you want to do it, you're going to do it uh, like direct to consumer, right? You could produce those protein bars in one of these kitchens, probably freeze them if that's the way you're going, or even refrigerate them and send them out that way, right?
Right.
You don't have to have your own manufacturing facility, so
Yeah. I think that's a huge advantage that wasn't available even just a few years ago.
yeah.
So let's talk just a little bit about iteration on the go to market. What are some of the mistakes that you see when people, let's say try to enter grocery or retail? What are some of the mistakes people typically make?
Um, just not having everything in line. And I see, meaning like not projecting their inventories correctly, selling out. Which is okay to do in certain cases if you're going to sell out and you're kind of want to draw people in that way, but that's more on the direct to consumer side of things.
Hmm.
Um, but just not planning inventory, I see happen a lot, and I've seen happen a lot over the years. And that's a just not knowing the industry and not knowing what you can ask the buyers at the grocery stores. I mean, they should be giving you a lot of this information and projecting inventory for you, but and projecting sales with you as well. But sometimes they don't, or the brands don't ask the right questions, you know? So I think it's just, talking to someone like myself or talking to other brands on their journey, is a huge kind of way to be ready for getting into a retailer. Like if you're getting into any kind of regional, natural grocery store, most of them should be able to give you that information, but I think that's the biggest mistake I see is just the inventory side of things.
Sure. Yeah. And obviously we do too as well. We're running a software company that manages inventory.
Yep.
We see the inventory mistakes, pretty much every day.
I was going to ask you that. I know you're interviewing me, but I was going to ask you that same question. You probably see that too,
Yeah, and especially I think people are okay at the finished good inventory. In a lot of ways that's a lot easier to manage. I think where it really gets complicated though is when you've got these raw materials, especially raw materials that go into several different products. And maybe you've got one supplier. Again, to our previous comments about just depending on one. I think you're vulnerable. But that's what leads to these stockouts. It's generally not that you just ran out of the finished product. Well, you did, but the reason you did is because of, one of the, the 20 or 30 raw materials that go into this product. And, you just weren't keeping a close enough eye on that, and that's what caused the problem.
Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, that's the kind of thing that we see, almost on a daily basis. So I want to double down a little bit and maybe drill in on the example of launching a protein bar company. So let's say that you're consulting with somebody who is doing that, and they're looking at possibly D2C, or they're trying to get into grocery store, and they're just trying to think of like what's the best path forward, to start to actually get some sales. What would be your advice to somebody in those shoes?
Having a plan, and what I mean by that is, having a plan of like, okay, here's my target customer. Here's where they shop. What does that grocery store look like? What do I need, for that grocery store to get into that grocery store, number one, but what does their shopper look like? What are their busiest stores? There's I feel like a million questions that I've listed out that I share with brands. But yeah, just having a plan. I think that's the thing people miss on sometimes is they're just kind of flying by the seat of their pants and then, but having a list of questions to, going back and asking the buyers, and knowing, so you're a protein bar. So when are the resets for these different category reviews, right? For each grocer that you're trying to get into, when are their resets? Like take, for example, I don't know the protein bar off the top of my head, but a good example is the juice company I'm working with right now is we have to have the pitch deck over to the buyer today. And then I'm assuming we'll have a pitch within the next 2 weeks, but we won't be potentially, if it's approved, we wouldn't be into any Whole Foods market until end of October. Right. So, just understanding the drawn out, kind of category reviews and granted, Whole Foods is a much bigger company than some of the regional grocers, but just really knowing all these ins and outs of getting into a grocery store. So, just sitting down and planning on how you're going to figure all these things out,
Sure. And you mentioned talking to the buyer. How would somebody even get in touch with a buyer or go about finding, buyers for these different stores? What's the best way to do that? What's some of the advice that you give along those lines?
So the advice I give is it's tough to find who the buyers are. I've always been a big proponent of creating relationships and as a brand and continuing those relationships. So I say, go into your local grocery store, talk to whoever manages the department that you're trying to get into, talk to them, talk to the local store, talk to the store manager, take some product with you, sell your products on the local level, is hands down the best way to go. If you don't want to do that, which I think you should, but LinkedIn, is probably one of the best ways to find out who buyers are, and then talking to other brands. Even if you're a competitor, talk to your competitors. I occasionally talk to my competitors in the consulting world, because there's numerous of me. So just creating many relationships in that realm. So
understood. Yeah, that's some good advice. Let's switch gears just a little bit. I kind of want to talk about trends and maybe the effects of COVID and kind of what you're seeing in the brand CPG space. We did talk about one, with these ghost kitchens and that how, those have expanded, and those are great opportunities for CPG brands. What other trends have you seen just in general, with CPG brands, maybe how they should go to market, some things they need to take into consideration that maybe they didn't before, just the effects of COVID on the industry in general. Do you have any that come to mind?
Yeah. Direct to consumer, I think is a must in this day and age in CPG. I think it's a way for you to not only be able to talk directly to your customer, because you really can't do that necessarily at being in a grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
But I think direct to consumer is just a must for really any brand, but specifically CPG. I know it might be tougher on the fresh side of things, and the frozen side of things can get a little more challenging, but if you're a shelf stable item, direct to consumers it's huge. And it goes along the lines of with COVID and how these brands, these grocery stores saw their online sales skyrocket. That's just, I think it's probably leveling out. You're starting to see that trend a bit, especially as things start to reopen. But I think just the digital age isn't going anywhere. So I think that's a must for brands. And if you're not, if you can follow the plant-based trend, and like the fermentation trend is going to be huge. I don't see that going anywhere. I'm sure you've seen the news about Tyson and the CEO. He's saying
I actually haven't. Yeah. What do you mean? You mean like the Impossible Burger and things like that, like plant-based meat?
Exactly. And plant-based in general. You've got Burger Kings in Europe that are opening up just plant-based. You're just seeing plant-based fast food pop up all over the place. So if you're a brand and you can create another product that's plant-based, ride that wave. I don't see that going away at all. I only see it growing,
And then can you mention just a little bit about fermentation, what you meant by that trend and kind of the opportunities there?
Sure. Yeah. Kombucha's, taken off in the last 6 years, I'd say. We're starting to see different proteins coming out of fermentation, which is really interesting and cool. There's a company, I think they're based out of Canada, called Perfect Day. They're making dairy out of fermentation processes, so
wow.
Which is really cool. Even like kimchi, the different types of kimchi and pickling and things like that, all that is still super trendy, so.
Nice. Okay. So I think that's a good overview of some of the trends. Were there any other trends maybe that you wanted to mention?
I mean, I think food service, I'll go back to that. I think food service is going to come back really strong. So if you're a brand that can pivot to food service, I can go back to the Indian thing. Say you're a CPG brand with an Indian flavored jarred sauce, figure out how you can, make a bulk pack of that and get it into food service places, or just sell your product into restaurants to use, or food trucks, or I don't know. There's so many different revenue streams that you can go after with food service. It's much more wide open than getting into a grocery store, So
yeah, interesting. Well, we're about at time, so I wanted to just shift over to the quick fire round. I've got 4 questions for you, and
sure.
just want to get the first thing that comes to mind. What is one tool or resource that you find extremely valuable in your job today?
Sunsama is like a kind of to-do list app that I absolutely love. I've been using for about 3 months now. It really organizes my day, puts a nice focus onto my day, connects to my calendar, connects to my Trello boards. Sunsama.
Nice. Sunsama. Okay, I'll have to check it out. What's a book that you could recommend to the audience?
Find Your Why by Simon Sinek. It's sitting right in front of me. I'm about halfway through.
I've actually got it on Audible, but I haven't listened to it yet.
It's awesome. Yeah. I think it's a journey that everybody should go down, is finding your why.
Nice. What's one piece of advice that you would give to your 21-year-old self?
Oh, man. Invest more. Buy real estate.
Especially at these prices right now.
Yeah, so. Exactly.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure it's nuts in California as well.
Oh, the median price is ridiculous now. It's up like $200,000 in 2 years or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't remember the movie, but there's some movie where somebody goes back in time and he says plastics, invest in plastics or something.
Yeah.
Back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Maybe today's might be, if you went back in time, let's say you went back 10 years, say buy Bitcoin,
Seriously.
It might be something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Who is one person in your field of work that you'd love to sit down and take to lunch?
I'm going to go with a competitor of mine. I'd love to sit down and talk with Ali Ball.
Yeah, who's that?
She's another consultant. She seems like a really cool person. We've talked briefly, but I just enjoy what she's doing, what she's putting together, and how she's helping brands. She's doing a tremendous job. Nice.
All right. As we wrap up here, just want to give you an opportunity. Just tell us a little bit about your services and who should contact you. Who's sort of your ideal client.
Sure. Again, my company is Natural Food Solutions. Yeah, I'm really good at helping brands pivot from CPG into food service. So I talk a lot about that, and I have kind of throughout this interview. That's one thing I'm really good at, helping brands pivot, and just really strategy on finding different revenues. And then on the revenue side, I'm really good at just financially modeling. I've got a template that I have for brands that is a full-blown planning template. You've got your P&L, you've got your costing calculators, you've got your promotional calculators, you've got your sales planning calculator by retailer, and kind of by revenue stream. So that's been pretty helpful to a bunch of the brands that I've worked with that use it, and my current clients. So yeah, those are probably my 2 best services that I offer, and guidance.
And yeah, just I'd plug just a wide breadth of knowledge about the industry and experience in the industry. So you don't feel like you're kind of just feeling around in the dark, as to how to go forward.
Yeah, exactly. I love helping brands. So
And what's the best way to get in touch with you if somebody wanted to reach out to you?
My website, it's natural-foodsolutions.com, and then my, Instagram, and then LinkedIn. LinkedIn's probably the best way. Just find me, Andrew Runnette. I'm somewhat active on there. So.
Well, awesome, Andrew. Hey, I appreciate it. I think this has been a good interview. I'd actually, like to do a part 2 here. Maybe in 6-8 months as people come out of COVID and talk a little bit more about some of the trends and some of the opportunities. I think that would be really helpful to the listeners.
Yeah, same, Ken. This has been awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'd love to do that. Absolutely.
All right, Andrew. Hey, thanks a lot. We'll talk later.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
The Physical Product Movement Podcast is brought to you by Fiddle. To find out more about Fiddle and how our industry-leading inventory ops platform is giving modern brands and manufacturers full visibility into their inventory and operations, visit fiddle.io. And then make sure to search for Physical Product Movement in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Fiddle, thanks for listening.